And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at a game from Stronghold called Space Cadets Away Missions. Now this is notable for a couple things. First of all, it's the first Kickstarter that Stronghold ran. And even though the word Space Cadets is in the title, it takes place in the Space Cadets universe, and even that on a very barely noticeable thing. This has nothing to do with the original game Space Cadets. This is essentially a dungeon crawl, if you will, in which you control an intrepid crew of people who go in and just blast aliens to pieces. All right, let me show you. I'm not going to explain every detail of the game, just kind of give you an overview of what's inside. Here it is. Now, the way this game works is players are going to take a handful of crew members and they're going to go through a mission. Now, there is a giant book of missions here. Alien missions, I'm not sure exactly how many there are, but there are 43 pages, so figure 21 missions here. Each mission shows you how to set it up and the details that go with these missions. They're not as complicated. These missions aren't very complicated to play. They take longer to set up, and this is a totally made-up mission here. And so players are going to be going through this mission. Sometimes in a mission, when you're going to be, most of the time, you'll be flipping tiles over. And each of these tiles has an arrow on it. And the tile that you start on shows the way that all these arrows are oriented, so you know how to move through things. Now, fortunately, there's not many walls in these scenarios. Everything's a door, or it's open space, which is problematic because the aliens can like squeeze through those doors. You have to open them and close them. But when you go to a new spot, you often will find like an alien, and these aliens are picked by whatever the scenario tells you. You're going to mix them up, put them down. So like this one here says, a leader and 2 saucermen. So a leader and 2 saucermen are placed on that space you have to deal with. Sometimes there's a piece of equipment. Here we have this strangely glowing orb. Ooh, I don't know what that does. And again, each of these different things will have different abilities and such, and players are going to be dealing with those. So on a player's turn, they're going to do this, and then they're going to activate and do different actions. Players are often going to do actions with these 10-sided dice. When you have 10-sided dice, you might, let's say you have a 3 in something that you're going to roll, you'd roll 3 dice. And in this game, you're trying to roll low. You're trying to get 1s, 2s, or 3s. Those are successes. So here, I've succeeded. Hooray! I've rolled a 1, 2, or 3. If I had rolled multiples, each extra one is called an overkill, and overkills let you do options. Each weapon and different things will give you options that you can use. You know, you might shoot someone with a weapon, and then now that you've done an overkill, you can do something else. Like, for example, here's the atomic rifle, and this atomic rifle here, and it shows, you know, how many dice you roll. In each square, you're here, so if someone's in the same spot as you, you roll 2. If they're next to you, you roll 5 dice, 5 dice. So you need 1 to hit somebody. But for each extra one, you dislodge the enemy, you can spend them on overkills, and move that alien in line of sight 1 tile. Each character has a stat sheet, and you can see the retro. I mean, of course, if you're going to call Yeoman here Cookie Hannah, that does seem retro, especially with the outfits, and each person has a special ability, which is basically an overkill option. Whenever you do an overkill, for example, Sawbones here, who happens to be the doctor, can heal people on overkills when he's doing different things. It also shows the different actions that you can do on your turn, and what each player is going to have is they're going to have some action points here, and sometimes they'll have a non-combat action point, and then they also will have an order scan number. This is for each player. At the beginning of your turn, you'll decide who gets the turn order. This will determine the turn order. And first you'll scan a tile, which means you're going to take a tile and flip that tile over to see if it's a normal tile and what's inside that tile, or maybe you'll find a special tile like this airlock, or maybe some just, you know, the spawning vats. Not very pleasant, but hey. So you're going to do that first, then you have the different actions that you can take. One of them, for this character at least, has to be a non-combat action. Captain Ben Riggs here actually has 3 actions here. None of them are not non-combat actions, so he could do combat with all 3 of his actions, and he even has a special ability where he can give an extra action token to other players. Players also have a spot here to keep their hit points that they have, and also their oxygen. Oxygen lets you take extra actions and do different things, and you can run out of oxygen. You can also run out of hit points, but I would recommend not doing that. Now, there are a lot of different aliens and miniatures in this game. I mean, look how many come in the box. There's really 100 or so miniatures in here of different types. And each of them comes with a card that shows how that alien works. It shows how many hit points. Most of them are killed with 1 hit, but some, like the Sentinel, are harder to kill. They will tell you how they move. See, all the players will take their turns, and then the aliens move kind of in a programmed way. It will tell you how they work, and it will also give their special abilities that they might have. Like these guys here can move and attack through closed doors. And if they're with a leader, a leader can move them. The Sentinel here is just a bigger, meaner guy. Shows that he rolls 6 dice when attacking somebody, and he has an attack range of 0, so he has to be in the same room as you. But when he overkills you, his effect is terror. So you look down here and look at what terror does. And so each of the different aliens will show up in different missions, and the missions can modify what aliens do. But you as a group will move all the aliens and deal with them as to how they work after you've moved each of your people. So you'll take your actions. You have free actions that you can do. You'll pick up new weapons that you can use and new items. There's all sorts of new items that you can have. There's simple things like, for example, a tool set here, which lets you re-roll any IQ action. An IQ action is you would use your IQ stat, and basically you'd roll that many dice, and again, you're trying to get a success. Or maybe you found a new cool gun, a ray gun, or an air knife. And these are the equipment that you can start with, but there's also cool things you can find. Here's that strangely glowing orb we mentioned earlier. Hey, that increases your IQ by 1. Or maybe a stasis box, or an ion scope. And each of these comes with a certain number of uses, which you'll use these little green cubes on, but you'll be using these to fight off the aliens and do them. All in all, folks, what I want to make clear is that this is a fairly simple game. You aren't doing this complicated line of sight and things. If you can see someone, you can shoot them. If you can move through a spot, you can move through it. You can open a door and go through it. You will have so many actions. The aliens move, automatically come at you. You're just trying to blow them off in a simple game of going through different tiles and completing missions. Okay, now, as I said, again, the game is fairly simple, but you might be surprised when you look at this giant rule book here. I believe there's 34 pages, and they're this big. That's not that big of a deal because I'd say 20 of those pages, I think. Well, let's see. Page 16 is the end of the rules, really. After that, there's just really long, extended ways to play. And the game is not, again, that difficult. Line of sight is simple. Spawning the creatures is simple. Moving and shooting and things. The success system is similar to that found in Arkham Horror and such, where you're just rolling to get a success. And maybe those overkills work well. It's a very clean system. My only problem with that system would be that you get hits on 1s, 2s, and 3s, which is just not intuitive because usually low numbers are bad. But you get used to it, and then you get those 10-sided dice and you roll them, and who doesn't like rolling 10-sided dice? The miniatures are decent quality. They're not as spectacular as, Cool Mini or Not or Fantasy Flight and stuff, but they work well. And considering there is, a ton of them in the game, it doesn't matter. So they're dying right and left anyway. I mean, really, you feel like you're walking through with a machine gun just like blowing away aliens. And I like it that way. It's a simple game that you could get kids to play. You could say, hey, we set this up. We have a ray gun. You find this new equipment. It has a very strong 1950s vibe to it, and how the artwork and the different kinds of equipment you have. You really, in this scenario booklet, just have so many different things that you can do. Here we have, you go to Saturn and find a sleeping ship. Here you go fight this giant, there's a brains in a jar that you're fighting in. Here a bug hunt on Uranus, and here a rocket ship assault on Neptune. So, anyhow, those are the scenarios, and they're really easy. They look complicated, but you set them up and you find different things, and the game is kind of open-ended. I'm sure people will make other scenarios. I don't know if this is going to be a system that's going to be expanded upon, that there will be expansion after expansion for. I don't know how many people will get into this. I'm getting a little tired of dungeon crawls in the fantasy setting. It's nice to see a space one, and it's nice to see one that's this light and simple. It's not the best one I played. It didn't blow my socks off, but I did enjoy the simplicity and the fun and just chucking dice and, using Star Trek phases because the characters do seem to be based on the Star Trek crew. And going through and then fighting things that look like they came out of the movie Aliens and such. It's cool, not gory, family-friendly, easy to get into. That's Space Cadets Away Missions. Dice Tower Judgment, approved!
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!
Yeah?